Thank you so much for coming. My name is Zeca Rodrigues. I'm Portuguese. I would say I raised in Paloma, but I actually was born in Portugal. So I immigrated when I was 15, and this has been home ever since. I welcome you to the San Diego Tuna Boats in World War II, and I thank everyone for being here and allowing me to share a little bit of our Portuguese history, some that you may not have known. So, go ahead. So this is a work in progress, and I really beg you to really share. Oh, I misspelled stories. To share with us your stories, your photographs, your artifacts. Actually, you'll have some here that on display. I thank Terry Seamus for bringing her father-in-law's radio, which was actually used, and you'll hear about the story. So if you know anybody who has a story, if you know anyone who has photographs, please send them our way. So today I hope to share with you how after the attack on Pearl Harbor and the U.S. declared war, the San Diego-based tuna boats were drafted into World War II, and they became as yard patrol boats, or better known as YPs. Just to give you a little bit of a background, up through the 1930s, tuna fishing boats in San Diego were known as bait boats. And bait boats only simply refer to the method of fishing that they were doing at the time. It simply means that they used bait to catch the tuna. You'll see this guy here. He's called the chummer. He's actually the guy that tosses the bait into the water so that the tuna go into a frenzy. And so this type of fishing was known as pole fishing. You'll see the poles. And also known as fishing from the rack, because they literally had a steel rack where they stood on, and that's how they fished. But I'll talk about pole fishing on another time. So after 1930, tuna bait boats, basically doing the same type of fishing, they became known as tuna clippers. And the reason they became known as tuna clippers is basically the same style of fishing, but the boats were, their size and speed, they were bigger and faster. And most tuna clippers measured over 90 feet. That was the optimum, and they could travel thousands of miles. By this time, our San Diego-based tuna bait boats were going as far down as Galapagos Island, which is off of Ecuador. So anyway, and they had diesel engines, and they had storage with big refrigeration system. So in 1930, actually, two San Diego tuna boats explored trying to fish off in the Pacific. And this exploration became to the attention of the U.S. Navy, who then started observing these boats and how fast they went and how far they traveled. And they thought about using them mainly as minesweepers if we ever went to war. This is, 11 years before. So they actually went as far as the Hawaiian Islands, the Palmyra Atolls, Christmas Islands, and the Marquesas, all in the Pacific. So much so that and I apologize for the color. In 1932, there was a Maritime Commission Act. And basically what this meant was that it cut through the legalities of actually using civilians in wartime. And it also, it condoned the seizure of their vessels. So in case of an emergency, they could basically take the boats and use them during wartime. So when the attack on Pearl Harbor occurred, the U.S. Navy activated its war plan to actually convert the San Diego Tuna fleet into warships. It's said that on February 16, 1942, the San Diego Port Director Commander, WWII Morcott, he was a U.S. Navy, addressed the American Fishermen's Association and said, "The Navy needs the service of your tuna clippers. They also need the men to man those ships." And so he asked who will volunteer. It said that over 600 people were in attendance and they all had their hands up. So also the majority of these were Portuguese, were from the Portuguese community. So at the time when Pearl Harbor was attacked, of course, there were tuna boats fishing, basically, like I said, from here to Ecuador. So when it was attacked, it was ordered that all tuna boats go into port, and they were to go into Panama or into California. The reason they wanted them to go into Panama is because strategists believed that the canal was going to be one of the places that the Japanese would attack. So as a result of this, all Japanese nationals who were in tuna boats, they were actually removed. Italian nationals in San Diego were not permitted to work on market boats or around fishing docks, and I'll explain a little bit about that. All right. So as a result, 52 San Diego tuna fishing boats were commissioned by the government. Most were Portuguese owned, and I said 49 to the Navy, 3 by the Army to guard specifically the canal. And so these boats were acquired boats called under a bareboat charter. So basically means they got the boat as bare as it was, and the government was supposed to equip and mend the boats, but we know different. So none of the fishing crew had, well, I shouldn't say none, because there was one specific that did have some military training, but most of them didn't have any military training, but all were exceptional navigators and all knew the coastal waters well. And that was kind of one of the primary things, was because they knew the coastal waters and these boats could go in and out easily. That was kind of one of the things. Captain Joaquim Theodore, who was a Portuguese captain, he told one of the officers that he didn't even know how to salute, or, to which the officer responded, "We don't care how you salute, we want for your seamanship." So, but. So what you may not know is there is actually a monument or memorial. It's called Tuna Fleet Service World War II, 1941-1945. And this monument, which is kind of a sign, it's actually downtown. It's right at the entrance of what's called Tuna Harbor. And it's really, if you know where the fish market restaurant is down there, it kind of looks a little bit to the midway, which you can see. It's right on the sidewalk, and then it overlooks the sport fishing vessels. So the YP Memorial was actually erected by the San Diego Port Commission in 2008, and it had the full support of the Portuguese Historical Center, and we have some members of that. So, like I said, this monument or this memorial really provides a lot of information about how the tuna boats were utilized during World War II. And by the way, if you go by this location tomorrow, you won't find the monument there. It's been removed. It's being replaced, and hopefully they'll clean it up a little bit better. Oh, you went ahead.
Oh, I went too far.
Okay. Back. One more. Okay, so like I said, it's a good resource of the information about the YP, and I think the way I'd like to present this is really do it in three sections. So the left side, the middle section, and the right side. So on the left side, it basically depicts a map of the Pacific. So here we have San Diego, and then over here is the Solomon Islands, which you will hear a little bit about. So on this first, it shows the fishing boat, the Azoriana, again, a Portuguese owner. This box says that tuna clippers joined the Navy and stalwart Portuguese descendants learned how to fight to fire guns mounted on the decks, and that's basically what they had to do. So box 2 basically tells us that the first tuna boats went on February 25th, 1942. The three pictures, this is the American Queen, which became YP 514, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. The Paramount, which became YP 289, and the Normandy, which is YP 291, probably the most photographed YP. So the middle section, like I said, that tells the story, and this part of the story is, so it tells you the story that during World War II, 52 tuna clippers went and taken by the Navy, Army, and Coast Guard, which is kind of, and then it talks a little bit about the industry and what was the industry composed of the big boats, that they became known as tuna clippers, and because they were equipped with powerful diesel engines and newly developed refrigeration, they could travel thousands of miles, which was very important. So that's in that kind of a little summary of what's in the story. Still in the story, it tells us that the time Pearl Harbor was attacked, 52 tuna boats were commissioned, which we already said. So again, still part of the story, that middle section, it tells us that after the war was declared, the government ordered the tuna fleet to make port into California or Panama. 3 of the clippers were immediately assigned to Panama. So I have a little. So from 1941 to 1945, these tuna boats were converted into what's called wartime supply and transportation vessels, and they became known as YPs, or Yacht Patrol vessels, or YPs as they're better known. So this is YP 291, the boat that we just saw. It was the Normandy, and the Normandy was built in 1938 at Campbell's for M.O. Medina, who was a very prominent Portuguese person here. Okay, so the Normandy, now basically what they did with all of these YP boats is they painted it gray. They replaced a number, kind of don't see it very well, but they replaced the number with the name of the vessel. So instead of Normandy, it says 291. And then they outfitted them with artillery, and you can see the guns on the top and the back. So this is the Azoriana, also a Portuguese owner, same owners. And on top you have the crew aboard the Azoriana when she was known as YP 292. And this is in 1942. And we'll talk a little bit more about this. So the artillery was basically, and this is again still part of the story, it was a 250 caliber machine guns of World I vintage, which you guys probably know a little bit more about this than I do, but so they had a hash can depth charges, and then a 20 millimeter cannon. One of the crew members, his name is Clemens Gonçalves, who was the captain of the Victoria, which was YP 350, We were so slow that almost anything could have sunk us. Our 50 caliber machine guns would have been pea shooters in a fight. So, they didn't feel too protected. Okay, so as the conflict moved toward Japan, YP tuna clippers were sent to the islands of the Pacific. And so you have the Solomon Islands there in that orange section. Okay. Is that somebody's? Okay. So what the Navy, like I mentioned before, initially the Navy wanted these boats mainly to cruise the coastal areas, but what they found, and they also wanted them as minesweepers because they felt they could do that. But the Navy discovered that the YPs were available to transport troops. They carried gasoline, like, thousands of gallons of gasoline. They carried ammunition, to other ships. They also could carry food because they had their refrigerators or refrigeration cargoes. They were capable of navigating the shallow atolls, which in the Pacific, there are many, many, many little islands and atolls there. So they could maneuver very well over the minefields. And then they could also tow the damaged ships. So, and most important, I think, they were able to rescue drowned pilots. So whenever a plane went down or a pilot came down, they were able to rescue them. Okay. So for these and many other reasons, they were often referred to as the Pork Chop Express, because they literally took pork chops, the errand boys of the Pacific, Solomon Island Ferry, and also as the Portuguese Navy. So still telling the story from the monument, it said that during the Solomon Islands campaign in 1942, the Paramount, which is YP-289, and the Picaroto delivered frozen turkeys and all its fixings for a traditional holiday feast at Guadalcanal. So that's why they were called pork chop. So again, telling the story, a YP crew, the monument says it actually could be between 4 to 20 men as a crew. And most of the resources I found, it said the YP crew generally numbered 17 crew members, 9 ex-fishermen, 8 Navy men, which one of them was an experienced gunner's mate. So this is the bait boat Paramount, which YP-289. In this endeavor, 21 vessels were destroyed and many, many lives were lost. So next to this box or this picture of pole fishing, they give a little bit of a background and talk about the 1911. There was a cannery at the foot of F Street, and then it also says that between 1930 and 1949, a pier was located at the foot of G Street, built by the port for the use by the tuna clippers and suppliers. And this was called Fisherman's Wharf, which I didn't know. So, and they talk a little bit about the pole and line fishing. So the story goes on, and again, in the monument, it says the successful wartime experience of the YPs caused the Navy to build after the war 30 wood hulls vessels patterned by the tuna clipper design. And on that note, what I'd like to share is that though the design of those clippers was designed by Manuel Madruga, or Jr., who is the son of the first Portuguese family to come to San Diego in 1887. So he worked at the Campbell shipyard and until 1876, sorry. So this part is not on the monument. I just wanted to give you a little side note. Now, the right section of the monument, it's entitled California Tuna Clippers Military Service, and then it has 7 columns. And the first column doesn't have a heading, but it just numbers 1 through 52, which were the vessels, the number of vessels that were taken. And then it talks about the second column is the year that vessel was built or converted, the name at the time of the acquisition, their military number, so a YP number, and then the year of military acquisition, the length of the boat, which was very important, and the type of loss it suffered. So, go ahead. So I'm just putting this as a slide so you can see a little bit better, although this one has more columns than it was. But you can see like some of these names. The first one, São João, very Portuguese name, Pátria, California, Europa, so Medellín. So of all these 52, Conte Bianco was an Italian boat and was taken because it was still under construction, so they took that. All right. So their usage, the usage of the YPs, as I said, far exceeded the original plan that the Navy had for them. And so we talked a little bit about their mainly missions. One was protect the coast, and they patrol from the west coast of the United States into Panama, and then they were taken to the islands in the Western Pacific, Hawaii, Guam, American Samoa, and New Zealand, and the areas around there. So, okay. So as I said, one of their uses was actually to deliver fuel. And I love this little story from Manuel Freitas. He says, 3 clippers loaded with aviation gas were headed to Midway Island, at 1,300 miles away, under the protection of 13 PT boats. Helmsman Freitas said, they thought we were escorting them. We thought they were protecting us. So as I mentioned already, they delivered food and Thanksgiving dinners and whatnot. Clarence Gonsalves said that we carried meat and vegetables from Pearl Harbor all over the Central Pacific, just like an express. Sometimes we come back from an 1,800-mile hunt, load with pork chops, and go right out again. They called us the Pork Chop Express. So, I hope you don't mind that I repeat myself in some of these, but so there are many missions. Again, they transported the sick and the wounded, sometimes 30 or more at a time. They were used as tugboats and rescue craft. They delivered mail and they delivered troops from one area to the other. So they rescued survivors of sunken ships, and they, most importantly, they rescued the pilots. Ed Madruga, the Portuguese gentleman, in different times we pulled pilots out of the ocean. Thank God, because we saved their lives. We knew they were down, but nobody would ever have found them, I don't think. We got the word out, and we did find them. One thing, our boys were good at seeing. We'd look for fish, and you have to have really good eyes. So that was one way of, they were called many different things, but in some of the articles I read, they said their preferred name was the Hooligan Navy. And basically, because they really didn't wear their uniforms, they didn't know how to salute, they didn't know how to do anything military. But one of them said they would sail into port with only vague memories of a shave or shower, 9 months without any bail, 7 months without any pay, no clothes. We looked like hooligans. So it's kind of. Anyway, In addition to all of these names, they were also known as the Cactus Navy. And the reason that they were known as the Cactus Navy, cactus was the military code for Guadalcanal. And so the YPs were doing a lot of work around that area, and so they were referred to as the Cactus Navy. So the Cactus Navy at Guadalcanal, and where is Guadalcanal, right? Ed Madruga said no one had heard of Guadalcanal and no one could find a reliable map. So, so basically here it shows the Japanese expansion, and this is where they wanted to go. And here's the Solomon Islands right in the middle of everything. So, that was the prime place. So what's so important about Guadalcanal? The primary reason was because by September 1942, Japan had moved their troops and laborers and had actually built an airfield in Guadalcanal. So Guadalcanal was the Allies' last line of defense before Australia, right? And so Guadalcanal became a piece of land that both sides wanted. So, and Japan had it. So, basically, following the destruction of some of their transportation vessels, and with only 2 destroyers in the fleet, this Marine Merritt A. Red Mike, he basically had seen the YPs work in around the Tulaging harbor, and so he basically drafted them to be part of the what became the battle at Tisimbuco in Guadalcanal, which became very, very important. So again, what's so important? We captured the airstrip on Guadalcanal. It was renamed the Henderson Field, and it halted the Japanese expansion. So it was very, very important. And the campaign at Guadalcanal can best summarized by Admiral William Halsey of the U.S. Navy, who said, he said, before Guadalcanal, the enemy advanced at his pleasure. After Guadalcanal, he retreated at ours. So you can see the massive importance that Guadalcanal had on this. So again, Captain Franchione of the United States Marine Corps, he was a commander of Company 1st Raider Battalion in Guadalcanal, and he said, it was only a small action that met little resistance, but it can't be argued that the raid on Tisimbuco, which is in Guadalcanal, saved the 1st Marine Division on Guadalcanal and set up the turning point in World War II. So I think this is something we should be very proud of. So I've listed here, not all of them, but some of a list of the Portuguese vessels that went to, that was part of this journey. And again, these were all Portuguese owned and vessels. And list of some of the Portuguese tuna clippers, captains that went. So we have Antonio Mascarenhas, Edward Madruga, Joe Muniz, Victor Rosa, Frank Gonzalez, Edward Varley, Edward Quillen, John Tasso, Manuel Freitas, Joaquim Tuador, and Joe Dors, and there are others, and this is where I need your help. So, all right. Interesting story kind of on the side. So there's a story about Dr. Charlotte Baker, who she was the first woman to practice, or the woman doctor, to practice medicine here in San Diego, but she also became the doctor that delivered most of the Portuguese boys, and so, or babies, I should say. So basically the government told the officers, you can keep your ranking, but you have to provide citizenship. And actually anyone who was going to be part of going to go to war, they would have to prove their citizenship. Apparently there had been a fire at City Hall, so they couldn't get their proof. Somebody had the bright idea and says, Dr. Baker delivered us. So they went to her. She apparently kept very, very copious record, just as if she was going to do the birth certificate, and the government accepted it. So that's that I did. So now I want to give you a little bit of maybe some personal stories. This is Tom Duvall. He's the father of a good friend, and I think a lot of you know him. So Eric Duvall. And Tom was a YP, and he kept a diary which Eric found not too long ago. And thank God he shared it. So so it says that Tom was a radio man. He had barely received his certificate when he was called to duty. So and then some of the excerpts from these pages we have, he's talking about where the ship is going. Well, he entered the Gulf at Tehuantepec. It was very stormy at night. Ship sprang a leak. The crew was up all night. Now they're off of Guatemala. They passed San Salvador. Now off of Nicaragua, 21 days from Panama. So it kind of gives you a little idea as to. So still some excerpts from Tom's diary. Go ahead. So he says on there, AM to be on YP 292, and she's a tuna clipper, and he actually looks like he's right there, second person on there. So, okay. In his diary, he says that a large patrol bomber circled us several times. You just imagine, this, about the fifth plane we've seen. They're now into Pearl Harbor, past the stricken battle wagons. A sorry sight indeed. Then he was transferred to YP 290 Picaroto, which is owned by the same people that own the Azoriana. It's actually the Rosa family. And so the captain of the new home or the Picaroto, they were going to Midway. And so, they have several thousand gallons of gasoline aboard. So I don't know how comforting that would be. So another story, we have the sinking of the Endeavor, which is the YP 284. And this is an eye account by one of the crew members who was the second engineer, Joe Doors. And so the sinking occurred off Guadalcanal on October 24, 1942. The vessel was attacked and shelled by 3 Japanese destroyers. While transporting a cargo of gasoline and 3,500 rounds of 3-point-inch ammunition from Tagalog to Guadalcanal. The Endeavor burst into flames before it sunk. All its 70 crew members jumped into the ocean. 3 died in the water. 1 was wounded by the explosion. They were in the water 3 hours before being picked up by Navy boats. And this information was given to me by Loretta Muniz, and her grandfather owned the Endeavor. So, Anthony Mascareñas, I think we all know, he's a fellow of our community. He was actually among one of the few that had some military training. So, and he was the captain of the big boat Normandy, or YP 291, which we see all the pictures of it. And Anthony, he was a naval lieutenant commander, and he serviced in Panama, Australia, and the Philippines, and returned home after 3 years of service And there's a picture of the boat. So this is a picture of the Normandy crew. You can see the YP-291 over there, and Mr. Mascarenas on the right as well. So Ed Madruga, he was the captain and owner of the Paramount YP-289, and he says that the urgency to get these boats in action forced the Navy to skip basic training. So he was assigned to a special duty, and Captain Madruga and younger brother Joe, who was his first mate, found themselves exploring the end of things behind enemy lines. And once when the YP-289 entered Bruac Channel, the radio started blurting, these frantic dots and dashes until they realized that the message said, "Stop at once, you're in a minefield." So he also says that, they basically delivered everything from 55-gallon drums of aviation gas to turkey dinners, but the cases of liquor had a habit of disappearing. They didn't know why. So again, he was one of the ones that said, the Pork Chop Express was no pleasure cruise. So, and then here is his, when he recalled about pulling the pilots out of the water. And in one of the interviews he gave, again, he said, "Thank God we saved their lives. Nobody ever would have found them, I don't think." So, okay. In this article, it says, if ships can be heroes, take off your hat to San Diego's tuna clippers. They were in the thick of the battle for Guadalcanal. So, Joaquim Teodoro, also Portuguese here, he was the captain of 346, and he took, again, troops to Tagali and Guadalcanal. And he was the one, they said no one had ever heard of Guadalcanal, and no one could find a reliable map. And he was instrumental in the Allies taking over Guadalcanal in the Battle of Tansibuco. And so the Japanese crew, as they were approaching into Guadalcanal, the Japanese cruisers shot them, and he said it was hell in all directions. The shrapnel from the anti-craft rounds struck Theodore between the shoulder blades, and he says it hit me like a ton of bricks. So, and there was blood everywhere. Barely breathing, he yelled, "Abandon ship," so his crew could get off, and then he screamed, "Beach the ship," because his thought was to get the ship out of the line of fire so that the other crews wouldn't be killed. So when he said that, his boatswain's Ernie Lopez grabbed the wheel and just shoved it in full throttle into the beach, and it did save them. It did save a lot of the guys there, and they lost one guy. So, for this, he was awarded the Purple Heart, and at the hospital, the doctor saw a jagged inch-long spot in his spine. So in order to get it, they actually had to take one. Now, just recently, as I said, it's very important to get these stories. Just recently, I came to find out about George Simas. George Simas is Paula, Jeff's, and Ron's father. And you all know Ron, Terry Simas's husband. Terry Simas is our community's de facto photographer. So everybody knows Terry. But this is an incredible story because, so George was not a YP crew member, okay? He was already in the Navy In the Air Force, sorry. When the war broke out. And he happened to be down in Panama about that time. So when the tuna boats were called into port, because he spoke Portuguese, and some of the crews couldn't understand English too well at the time, he was actually called to interpret or, translate for these guys, kind of explain to them what was going on. But what's really interesting about this is that fast forward 2 years, George is assigned to an actual tuna boat, okay? Not a YP, a regular tuna boat. The thing about this tuna boat, it was flying a Portuguese flag. So Portugal was neutral during World War II. So if the Japanese spotted this fishing boat, they wouldn't do anything to it, right? Now, the government basically provided these guys with passports. The crew was told you are only to speak Portuguese in the boat and when you go to port. So, and then lo and behold, when Yamamoto, who was the Japanese admiral who basically declared the war or attacked us really, so he dies in 1944, right, in the Solomon Islands. Somebody finds his code book, and it comes, a copy of it is put on Mr. Seamus's boat, right? So he comes to look at this thing. He kind of figures there's some Japanese characters in it, starts studying, and lo and behold, they found out that it's actually Yamamoto's code book, right? So he's able to decipher, and with others, but he's able to decipher the Japanese book, the code messages that were going because of this, and so he was able to provide that information to the authorities, who then sent it to Pearl Harbor. And so, I just thought, and I really thank the Seamus family for sharing this with us. So, okay. Now, as I mentioned before, the Italian fishermen had a tough spot at this when the war broke out. And the main reason was because of the rise of Benito Mussolini, who was the cause for concern. Also, the military felt that because the nature, the close-knit nature of the Italian family, whatever was told one person, everybody would know. The family would know. And so they basically wouldn't allow them to go to be part of this. So they always felt family came first, and they didn't want to take a chance. So what happened, and I don't know if many of you know this, there's a proclamation, 2527. This proclamation is called Notice to Aliens of Enemy Nations. And it is in English, it's in Italian, it's in German, and it's in Japanese, saying the exactly same thing. And what it says, the United States government requires all aliens of German, Italian, Japanese nationality to apply at the post office nearest their place of residence for a certificate of identification. Applications must be filed between the period of February 9th through February 28, 1942. And so they were to go to their postmaster to do this, to be registered. So Vicente Battaglia, clearly an Italian name, he must have provided enough, he must have been like a second generation already Italian. He was allowed to be part of the YPs. And he was interesting because he actually worked in the engine rooms. And he said that it was so hot in there that they really usually didn't use their dog tags because the heat would actually brand them, it burned them. So, but when it came to September 1942, he wanted to make sure that if he died, that he could be identified. So he just he made some. He actually tied it to himself. So. Interesting story is that there were fishermen that didn't go to war with these boats. So they didn't have work, right? And basically, they needed to provide for their families. So what I have read is that the government actually helped find those people's jobs. So I don't have details about that, but that's one of the things. And then with the men going to war, the women went to work. And that's how a lot of the women started working at the canneries. That was kind of part of it. So, as I said, almost all the tuna clippers that served as YPs during World War II were from San Diego, and the majority of these boats were from the Portuguese community. So, something to be proud of. So there we have the famous quote attributed to Howard William Ostercombe from the Korean War, and he said, "All gave some gave all." So that's my presentation. I hope. Thank you for coming. And again, if you know anybody who has a story, who has photographs, anything, it's really, really important, because that's the only way we really know and can complete the story. All right? Yes.
Do you know any of the other men that were on that picture? Do you know any of the names of the seamen that were on the white piece?
On the Azuriana?
Yeah.
It's hard. I think, Lynette, your dad was on there?
Yeah, but
He didn't
that
go.
was taken before, he wasn't allowed to go because he wasn't an American citizen.
Right.
He said he didn't have papers, so he couldn't go. But he wanted to take pictures with them.
Yeah.
And he was there.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that I believe that this is Eric's father. Kind of looks like him. But I don't know. I haven't been able to identify. Yes.
I thought it was married, and so he didn't.
Anyone? Right? Yeah.
I did.
I got to talk.
Yes.
Definitely.
I was at the Midway Islands in 1943 during Thanksgiving. You probably got some of that.
Some of that, yeah. There's a lot to oblige. Any other questions?
I have something.
Yes.
My father was on Guadalcanal, Army intelligence sergeant with the Marines in Henderson Field. So I don't know how he got onto the island. Maybe he was from one of the white depots, but
Probably.
he did mention to me about turkey dinners coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are important. So, yeah, because that actually that's the white peas were used for a lot of the troops, bringing the troops in there. So, yeah. Any other questions? If we have no other questions, I have the beginning. Manuel Pia. Manuel has a story and he would like to share. So why don't you come over here?
Yeah.
Are you Dolores' son?
Yes, I actually am.
Oh, you are Dolores' son.
See? We make connections.
First of all, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Manuel Pia. My family is from Frank and Eugenia Pia, and my uncles were Avelino and Father John. In fact, out of all the Gonzalez's, I'm the only one that didn't go to sea because I got drafted and I spent my entire time in the Navy. I spent 26 years, and that was because of my grandfather, Manuel. Because Manuel was on Mr. Theodore's boat that got sunk off of Tulagi, And he used to tell us stories about how they had to carry Joaquin through the jungle on Chilagi, and he was bleeding pretty bad.
Yeah.
But they got him over there. So I wrote this in regard to the stories he told me when I was a little kid. And I put this thing I submitted it to the reader, and I ended up getting published on a special account. And the deal with it is I want to give this to the Historical Society because it's my take on the story of the Yippie. So if you guys are patient for a few minutes, it'll only take me about 5 or 6 minutes to read this. Yippie. Now this happens in the Midway Islands. Now I'm also a volunteer on the USS Midway, and up there before the battle there were 4 YPs. 2 of them were tuna boats. One didn't come back, and they don't know why. So this is how this story evolved. It's at Gardner Pinnacle, Hawaiian Islands, June 3rd, 1942. Up in the crow's nest of the Southern Cross, João, a Portuguese crewman, was assigned an early morning watch to check for enemy movement. Bonito, João said, observing the Milky Way galaxy, which splashed across the moonless sky, illuminating the boat and the coral ring Gardner Pinnacles off in the distance. The heavenly sight was the only noteworthy event João observed in the second hour of his watch. Southern Cross, RIP 251, I did my research. That was not a boat. It wasn't built. Was a San Diego tuna clipper repurposed for naval service in 1942 as part of a class of vessels known as Yippies. I call them Yippies. You call them Yippies. A slang term for yard patrol craft. They consisted of yachts, harbor craft, and fishing vessels requisitioned for the military service to supplement America's growing maritime forces. Currently steaming south of Midway Island, the Southern Cross is assigned to assist in refueling patrol aircraft, rescue downed pilots, and check for Japanese activity along the length of the Hawaiian Islands. João had come to the States from Madeira in 1939, living with his TS family in San Diego's Portuguese community. He commercially fished the elusive tuna along California's Pacific coast. When war broke out, as a non-citizen, João was not allowed to enlist. He felt rejected, believing it was a sacred duty to serve his new adopted country. But when the U.S. military requisitioned tuna clippers as naval auxiliaries, they needed experienced crewmen, and João was allowed to join the Reserve Navy. Due to his expertise, becoming a third-class seaman, he vowed to give his all and not let his United States down. It had been a month since he left San Diego, and the burly 20-year-old fantasized about his Irish girlfriend. A red-headed, freckle-faced nurse's aide named Yvonne. He'd met her at a church social, timidly asking her to dance, being overwhelmed by her acceptance. "Indeed, I will," she gleefully said, joining her hands with his. From that first moment, their affection for each other grew. João was in love, struck by the thunderbolt. He believed their unique ethnic customs, familiar bonds, and religious beliefs made them fit into a blended American culture. He dreamed of a future life together. João watched as the rising sun crept up from the eastern horizon. The hazy sunlight illuminated the outline of a vessel bearing out of the western shadows. João strained his eyes, trying to recognize the shadowy intruder, which seemed to be maneuvering towards the Southern Cross. Then he recognized it, and it wasn't good. "Filha puta," he muttered, then yelled down the voice to the helmsman of the pilot house. "Jabasaba, port the quarter." João heard the command of the PA system, "Man the guns, let's crank her up." The crewmen scrambled the man up to 350 caliber machine gun stations, load them with ammo, and start firing out the sub. The tuna clipper vibrated as a full throttle diesel engine pushed the vessel towards its adversary. "Merda!" João winced at the staccato bursts of the machine guns, realizing his action station was supplying ammo and delivering messages to the gun crews. João shooting down the mast, hit the main deck, and ran to his machine gun post. The crack of the Japanese sub's main deck gun crashed out. A shell whizzed above the pilot house. Within a minute, a second shell. What's up? I'll get it. I used to be a teacher too. Hit the pilot house, exploding half of it into thousands of splinters, spewing wood shrapnel over the boat's main deck. Peeking over the gunwale, he saw the Japanese sub motor alongside, pumping machine gun bullets into the tuna clipper. The Southern Cross was dead in the water, listening to port. A small raft of Japanese sailors started across the tuna clipper, hoping to find any intel on U.S. fleet movements. Smoke and fire rose from the boat's stern, where the 50-gallon barrels of aviation fuel was stored. Then, in a thundering blast and a flash of flame, the boat exploded, spewing metal shrapnel and wooden debris through the air, smashing the Japanese raft and striking the upper decks of the submarine. Joao was in shock, his body peppered with slivers of wood, a large wooden splinter embedded into his upper leg. Ears ringing and buzzing, Joao fell back against the starboard gunwale. "Que diabo," he mumbled, as the water rose around him, swirling and sucking the Southern Cross under. Joao struggled to pray, gripping the small crucifix around his neck. "Forgive me, Father, I did my duty. Let my madre and Tia not suffer my death. Oh, and take care of Yvonne." In his confused mind, Joao thought it was a fisherman's day. The tuna was running, the sky was so blue. A U.S. destroyer receiving the tuna clipper's distress signal raced towards the pinnacles. They located the sub, creeping along, its conning tower demolished, spewing fuel from its damaged hull. The destroyer's gun smashed what was left of the sub and watched it slowly sunk into the blue Pacific waters. An hour later, the destroyer reached the pinnacles, searching around the coral reef, finding no survivors from the Southern Cross. Amid the floating debris, a small, waterlogged framed black and white photo was found. It showed a young couple embracing on a pier, a fishing boat in the background. They beamed at the camera, displaying the affection they had for each other. An honor detail and a religious service was held with all hands, honoring the seamen who died that morning's conflict. Knowing that the crew were mainly tuna fishermen, the destroyer's chaplain, an Irish priest from a Portuguese parish in Massachusetts, gave the final lesson in English and Portuguese as the slim slowly disappeared into the Pacific.
Again, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you coming. I hope it was somewhat enlightening. And we have some food and drink in the back if you'd like to do. Before we do, we also have the Portuguese Historical Center is right across the street. And we're small, but great group of people. We have lots of things to see and do there. And if you'd like to be a member, we have some membership applications in the back. It's, $40 now.
Yeah.
So per year, and you get some great stuff for that. So thank you again for coming. I hope you enjoyed it and ate some food.
I don't know.